I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now. I have with me on the phone Ian Burns, our managing editor, all the way out there in Ottawa. Beautiful day in the Okanagan. Sun is shining. Skies are blue. How are you doing in Ottawa there?
Pretty similar, I would say. Maybe a bit more cloudy, but we're also expecting, I don't know how much it is. I think 40 centimeters of snow or something like that tomorrow night. So it's not going to last long.
40 centimeters? Like a foot and a
Something
bit?
along those lines, some kind of
Wow.
insane amount, yeah.
Well, there you go. Winter wonderland. Not so much here. Um, we thought we had a 30-day reprieve on the tariffs, but Trump came out yesterday with a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum. And then it's Holly Doan, the Blacklock's a story out there saying that could translate into a 40% price hike for steel and aluminum products. And the similar tariffs were in 2018 blamed for killing Canadian businesses. These reckless tariffs threaten tens of thousands of good-paying jobs and destabilize industries across Canada. And then we talked yesterday a little bit about Jim Farley from Ford CEO says, like the economies between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico are so intertwined when they're manufacturing vehicles that these types of tariffs will really hurt the price of automobiles, hurt jobs, all kinds of things. And they said that they're trying to talk to that administration to try and get them to, have calmer heads. But this seems to be one that's been thrown out there. And this isn't just on Canada and Mexico. This is on 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States.
Yeah, but for aluminium, as I grew up calling it, rather than aluminum, in by any other name, that's just a tariff on Canada, really. Because I mean,
Because we put
they
so
get
much there.
Yeah, I mean Canada is like way ahead in terms of where the Americans get their foreign aluminium from. So that's just targeting Canada. Canada also sends the most steel. So I mean this is just another way for him to attack Canada, I think, because
Right.
he has this particular hatred of Canada, it seems. I mean, he was talking to somebody on Fox News the other day and he was saying that not the first time he's used this kind of language, but saying that I don't want any cars from Canada. And he says, in his distorted view of the universe, Canada stole the car industry from the United States, rather than it being just straight up business, sort of just free market economics and business decisions that were made because it was cheaper to do it that way. Rather than it being that, it's some kind of malicious, evil plan from the Canadians to steal the jobs making Ford cars and so on. So I just think he wants to punch Canada. He wants to hit Canada as hard as he can. And this is just another way to do it, really, steel and aluminium, just
Well,
because
we,
they're
we
particular, they are Canadian exports, really. It's just they might as well be called tariffs on Canada.
Yeah, we really don't do much in the automotive sector compared to the world. Like we're less than 2% of the auto manufacturing, so I don't know how what we stole. I think most of the auto manufacturing now is happening in China. If you want to talk about who stole the auto manufacturing, but
Yeah,
yeah,
none
so
of it for America, though, really.
uh,
Not much of it anyway.
uh, Canada does send over $11 billion in 2024, $11 billion worth of steel to the United States, and almost $10 billion of aluminum. So huge for Canada in the steel and aluminum sector for sure.
But I mean, the Americans as well. What makes this just so bafflingly stupid, so like unfathomably, painfully stupid to see the American president trash his own economy as well as Canada's and Mexico's, is that all of this happened. All of these like aluminium producers and all the rest of it, and the steel, it all happened with the more than just the connivance, but with the sort of guidance in many cases of Americans, political and business. Like the North American economy, by North America meaning Mexico, Canada, and the US, is so famously integrated, really,
Yeah.
because of the Americans. The Americans, as usual, as they do in almost all areas in North America, they led on this. And now all of a sudden, they've elected somebody who thinks that it's like 1895 and that you can put tariffs on things and get rich. And now Canada just has to kind of eat that poison and suffer. It's kind of it's particularly ironic that, Canada does this kind of stuff to help America because or it created this industry in alignment with the US and with the Americans' needs. And now all of a sudden they're just saying, "No, I don't want that anymore because we've elected this madcap lunatic from the 19th century." I mean, it's quite unfortunate, really. But you have to, in that sense, you have to look at it and say this is almost certainly an anomaly because, I mean, as anybody that still has gray matter functioning will tell you, it's not 1895. You can't get rich from tariffs anymore. The only reason that the Americans benefited from tariffs in the 19th century is because they exploited the gullibility of the British Empire, which did not have tariffs. So they basically committed a kind of economic warfare against the British Empire, where they dumped their products into Britain and put tariffs on British products. So it really was a zero-sum kind of mercantilist arrangement, and the Americans prospered. But there's nobody on earth as stupid as the British Empire anymore. That doesn't exist. There's nobody that's as gullible as that. So you can't make money from tariffs in the same way anymore. But I mean, if what I've read is correct about the Trump team, he is in no mood to speak to anyone or hear from anyone that disagrees with him. So, you know, people who object to this kind of thing really might as well be shouting into the void because Trump will not listen.
Well, I mean, let's hope that we do have a USMCA agreement that, like has steel and aluminum in there. And the only how he's doing this is he's saying that it's a national security threat, and that's how he gets outside the USMCA. So I think, like, hopefully the Canadian government is taking him to court. And I know that, like, maybe that doesn't work or doesn't work, but at least we should be exploring those avenues because he is
Well,
losing a lot of court
we've done that
battles.
before, and
Yeah,
we've done that before and won. Like we
yeah,
discussed this before. It's pointless. It's
yeah,
completely pointless. It's a waste of time. The only reason to do that would be for PR. But then
yeah.
who do we want? Who do we want to win the PR battle? Who are we trying to persuade? You know,
Mhm.
I don't understand. I don't think there's anyone out there to persuade. The Europeans, the Chinese, and all the rest of them already realize that this is demented and that these are the actions of a almost deranged person when it comes to economics.
Just
Like who can we win the argument with? It wouldn't help us.
Justin Trudeau is in Paris right now at the AI summit, and he did have a response, and he's saying that he's trying to work with Trump after the imposed 25% tariffs, a move that would affect Canada. He says that they're unacceptable and that he may retaliate.
Well, it's the same as last time, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because they were 10% last time, I think, weren't they, the tariffs?
I still can't believe
Um,
that we don't call Parliament back so that we can use the full strength of our Canadian parliamentarians to kind of address this. And, like, even right now, like, if this is our biggest economic crisis, what are we doing in Paris? Like, can you send somebody else to Paris? Like, did you need to be there?
well, I guess they would say that they're there to kind of, well, JD Vance is there, so you could say it's like two birds with one stone. He's there to lobby Vance, and he's also there to kind of get the Europeans to
Well,
support Canada so that they don't all fall individually, but rather stand up to Trump
if
together.
you if you listen to, and I did, if you listen to JD Vance's speech at the summit, it seemed like it was directed at Justin Trudeau, like a lot of it. So
Yeah, well, it's also questionable anyway because JD Vance is not an independent thinker. He's not an independent operator. He's a 100% loyal servant to Donald Trump. So, I mean, the best you could expect from Vance is that he would relay the message to his
yeah,
master, and then that's it. So, I mean, everything goes to the Lord, and the Lord is Trump. So, in a
well,
way, it's kind of it's kind of a waste of time. And then also the Europeans are extremely exposed just as we are because they have a massive surplus with the United States, the
hmm
European Union collectively, and the Americans are the buyers. They take the sort of the produce, they take they provide the demand, so that automatically means that again, anybody that's done economics 101 knows that the Americans have the upper hand. Whichever trading partner buys the more stuff. from the other partner is automatically going to win. They have the advantage, providing that they can,
I guess
do without the products. And the Americans can certainly do without French cheese and so on. Like they don't really care about that at the end of the day.
I guess one of the questions would be like, like even in the Biden administration, what they did to much of the world by weaponizing the US dollar, they cut off, like the BRIC nations and stuff like that. So that kind of like turned a lot of people off of, trade with America. Now Trump coming in here and basically throwing tariffs around, basically weaponizing trade, I would say, like, with tariffs. I mean, if the Biden administration weaponized the US dollar, Trump is definitely weaponizing tariffs and using them as an
Yeah.
economic warfare against, friendly nations such as Canada. Maybe we
That's the
should coin
difference,
that
I would
phrase.
say.
What's that?
The Biden presidency targeted the traditional enemies of the United States, whereas Trump is obsessed with the best friends that America has and ever has had. So I
Yeah.
mean there's a difference there, though we should also say that Biden did a lot of protectionist economic policies as well that really hurt Canada. So I mean it's not like Biden was a great friend to Canada, but Biden didn't seem to have any particular animosity towards Canada, whereas Trump so far in his presidency, it's not even been a month yet, but based on this, what we've seen so far these few weeks, Trump's number one enemy and concern is Canada, which has to be one of the craziest sentences that anybody's ever uttered in history, really. Oh, at least since 1812.
Yeah, so like we have the cities, you put this up, but ranking of Canadian cities that are vulnerable to the US tariffs, and like St. John leading the way. Yeah, and
Yeah,
then
they have a big
no,
refinery
not
there,
that
big
one,
oil.
Rommel. Yeah, I guess yeah, the Canadian cities that hit that, St. John's, New Brunswick, Windsor, Ontario, but then there's that chart, the next slide there. Yeah, so I mean, if we look at that, there's a lot of Canadian cities that will feel this.
Yeah, and they're kind of, I mean, they're oil and cars, really. St. John has that
Yeah.
big refinery. Calgary, obviously, lots of oil, and then also agricultural stuff like beef. Windsor's cars. The next one's cars. I mean, they're all cars, really, aren't they? Saguenay as
Mhm.
well. Also does automotive. Don't really know about Trois Rivières, but I imagine it's probably cars as well. And then all on the other side of the ledger there, Sudbury is the most fascinating one because obviously that's completely devoted to resources, to nickel and uranium and stuff like that, isn't it? But I guess that doesn't have to go to the US or doesn't go to the US. But then Kamloops. I mean, it's quite interesting to see BC. BC looks pretty pretty cozy there, doesn't it? I mean, obviously it will suffer because of a lack of like a loss in custom across Canada and the US, I would imagine, and kind of unrelated products, but
Yeah, I
they're
mean,
they're
again,
looking
I
pretty
would
pretty
say
happy
that
there.
Trudeau should be recalling Parliament and setting up some trade missions and sending people to different nations and starting to do deals. I mean, to alleviate these tariffs, like we should be starting it. Like that $1 trillion deal we lost to the Japanese because we refused it. There's other deals out there, like the Germans for LNG, all kinds of stuff. Like, let's start making deals. And so that these
Yeah.
tariffs, even then to Trump, that he is going to compete for our business as opposed to treating us like we're a captive audience to him right now.
Yep. Well, the Japanese, the Koreans, and the Germans, they were three of the people that came and asked for energy, didn't they? And it just so happens by a fortunate coincidence that those three countries are pretty much the best manufacturers in the world, possibly that the world has ever seen, really, other than maybe China would be the other one that you would include. So that being the case, I'm pretty sure that if all the energy of the Canadian state was directed towards this goal, and then we brought in the South Koreans, Germans, and Japanese, I think we could probably build some infrastructure pretty quickly if they're involved and they send over some of their engineers. So I mean, there's every reason to think that that deal could still come off and it could still work.
And then you put this one up here of the impact of the Canada-U.S. political climate on travel to the U.S. Nearly half Canadians now are less likely to visit the U.S. amid threats. And a lot of that too, I would say, is a lot of it. It's very expensive to visit the United States right now. Was in Vegas just recently. Very, very expensive. And I just had a friend come back and said that it was just crazy expensive where our dollar is.
Yep. But I mean, I must admit, it's a big ask, that, isn't it? To expect people to still go and visit the US or buy like
Hmm.
obviously American products for
Yeah.
which there is an alternative, when the United States has just elected a president that seems to despise Canada and want to economically destroy Canada and says that he wants to annex Canada. And I mean, in those circumstances, probably the least you can do is not go to America unless you absolutely
Yeah.
have to.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with what our government puts out there too. I mean, we just saw our federal government go back on that Meta ban and just spend money with, an American company, Meta, which is basically still blocking news on their sites.
Yeah, it would be good, wouldn't it, if the Liberal government would behave in the way that it told other people to behave. But apparently that's too much to ask of our dear leaders who rule over us.
Um, so lots of stuff coming out of Pierre Polyev and some of the promises there. We'll go move to the icebreaker slide there, Rommel. He promises an Arctic naval base and icebreakers, fighter jets, and a base up there, and then we should start looking after our military. And that same stuff is coming out of even Chrystia Freeland now, and saying that she wants to spend more. I think you and I talked about that yesterday, how she wants to spend increased wages. It took that idea from you, increase wages for military by 50%. That was your idea.
Chrystia, I mean, we know she's a long time listener. She's never called in, but we
No.
we know she listens, and we're grateful for that. I would say to Polyev here though, or about Polyev here, he says if we are to be sovereign, if we are to be a sovereign, self-reliant nation, we must take control of our north. And then he says something about we can't count the Americans anymore. I mean, so go from 2,000 to 4,000 Canadian Rangers, a couple of icebreakers, and one army base, the first army base to exist, or the only one that's going to exist in the north. Is that taking control of a landmass about the size of like Europe or something like that? I
Yeah.
wouldn't call that taking control. I would say that's the equivalent of putting one security guard to, protect every single store in Manhattan or something like that. But I suppose one security guard is better than none.
Well, I mean, we have underinvested in our military for a long time. That has been a complaint of the Americans and many politicians here in Canada. Our complement right now is around 55,000. I think a full complement is supposed to be 76, which is still a very small military for a country as large as ours. And with this huge borders, we're the second largest landmass in the world. And that northern border of ours is largely unprotected. And the Russians are up there with Russian icebreakers, and the Chinese are up there, and we're kind of like absent.
Yeah. And I would say, and I'm not being hysterical here. This isn't hyperbole, but I would say the country you've forgotten to list as the United States, which I would say by the time this century's finished, if you were to tell me, if you were to come from the future and say the Arctic no longer belongs to Canada, it belongs to another power, which power is it? I would almost certainly say the United States. If somebody's going to take the Arctic, it's going to be the US, I would say. Those
Well,
two countries, I
they
don't
have
think they have a
access.
particularly bright future. I don't think China or Russia have bright futures, but I
Yeah,
think the US will still be powerful by the
yeah,
end of this century, and I think they're going to want that territory for themselves.
and they do have access to the north with Alaska.
Yeah, and they've also made completely bogus claims about how it's the Canadian Arctic waterways are actually international waterways and that they're free to go through there. They've been saying that for a long time.
Hmm.
And then when Canada says, obviously that's not true, then they just say, in effect, what are you going to do about it? And that just, that's what the Trump presidency is in many ways. It's the Americans just saying, what are you going to do about it? Like, we've got the best weapons, the biggest economy. If you try and resist, we'll just crush you. So be a slave. That's basically that's basically the Trump presidency in a nutshell. And the sad truth is, what can we do? If the Americans set their heart on the Canadian Arctic, what can we do? What can we actually do? The only realistic defense that we could have would be to acquire nuclear weapons and destroy as many American cities as we can, and in the process also die as a country. So the only thing that we could do is kill them and us at the same time. Realistically, if they want it, it's theirs, isn't it? I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah, well, let's temper that because yesterday, I don't know what they accused us of selling out our country to the United States. People say some weird things, right? Which obviously we're as pro-Canadian as it gets, and that too is we're not campaigning to have nuclear weapons to blow ourselves into kingdom come. But just what Ian's saying there is that, like, what really can we do if the Americans decide that they want to be the bullies that they're being right now?
Yeah, I mean, if you're too stupid, if somebody's listening to this and they're too stupid to understand what I'm saying
Yeah.
and think that I've advocated for getting nuclear weapons and starting a war with America, then I would say just go away now. Just like turn off. You're too stupid to understand that. Don't bother. And I
All
would
right.
also say about that person on Facebook, that
Yeah.
semi-literate post by a half-wit liar on Facebook. I mean, again, as well, if you take that kind of thing at face value, I think you need remedial care. You need help if you're in that situation.
I think some people just love to just throw. They got used to it in COVID, where they can just throw lies up, and we've seen that from some of these, like these people that think they're protecting their party or whatever, and so they just throw like hate and they shriek as loud as they can and make up things, right?
Yep, Facebook's the place to do it as well.
Yeah, it's too bad we can't be on Facebook, so we could shriek
Yeah,
there
we
as well.
we can't go and tell lies on Facebook. We can't do anything on Facebook.
No. Um, Chrystia Freeland. She must be reading Pierre Poilievre's playbook because this is the great one. I interviewed Sean Fraser, the Liberal housing minister, recently, and I asked him if they would eliminate the GST on new homes because it worked really well when they eliminated the GST on purpose-built rental homes. Because even in Kelowna, we've had so many purpose-built rentals. It's been great. So I asked him why not remove it from the GST because that's what Pierre Poilievre was campaigning on. And it looks like Chrystia Freeland has got religion there, and she says, yes, let's take the GST off of new homes for Canadians.
Well, when you did interview Sean Fraser, he almost seemed to have that up his sleeve. That was my impression as like just as somebody that's been involved in political journalism for a long time, because he kind of flirted with it a little bit, didn't he? He was like, well, we're doing the sums, we'll see what we've got. Like
Mm.
I think it was probably at least certainly they'll have been discussing that, and they'll have got some federal workers, like some civil servants, to sketch up a plan or something, like they usually do that kind of thing to see if it's worth doing. But no, about what you're saying about Freeland adopting a lot of conservative policies, I mean that is very interesting, isn't it? Because, well, as we said, whenever it was we last discussed this, she didn't show those kinds of inclinations when she was actually in a position of power. And now that she doesn't have power, it's she's really done a 360 or
Yeah,
180, I should say. Sorry.
I've read a lot of her platform, and what's missing on her platform, what the Liberals has been their pillar, is she doesn't have anything about climate change on there. She doesn't have anything about carbon tax. She doesn't say whether she's for it or against it. She just doesn't have. It's just missing, and she does have a lot of things about investing in our military, increasing the wage, which would be a great thing, I think. Increasing the wage to the military to convince people to join the military, that people are willing to put their lives on the line, give them a decent wage. Like you said, why are we paying bureaucrats that are sitting in or working from home more money than we're willing to pay somebody that's going to live in a tent and trudge through mud, and we're going to pay them less? Like, why would
Well,
you be
not even
coming to?
that. Not that. I mean, that might be a good day. Going through mud. What we're really asking them to do is kill strangers on our behalf. That's
Mhm.
ultimately what it comes down to. If you chip away all the nonsense, that's what people in uniform have agreed to do, and that's what we want them to do, to kill people, to keep us alive. And then we give them less money than an assistant manager at Tim Hortons or something like that. Like, that's not serious at all. Hence, nobody wants to do it, or very few people want to do it anyway. I mean that is absolutely basic economics. Talking about basic economics.
And then we
Nothing is
treat
more basic than that.
And then we treat them like crap when they come back. Like we have veteran homelessness. I mean, I think you shouldn't have to work again in your life if you've served. And it's crazy. I remember again this town hall sticks in my mind when a veteran was in a wheelchair and asked Justin Trudeau for money for a better chair, and Justin Trudeau said, as a matter of factly, we just don't have money for that right now.
I mean, that's a hell of a gaff, isn't it?
And they did offer, and then there were stories that were out there that they'd offer some other veterans maid as opposed to help.
Yep, few very, very shameful instances of that having occurred. I mean, that's like a gigantic scandal, isn't it? I almost feel like that's a scandal that we still haven't really come to terms with, like moral terms, with just how despicable that actually is.
I
But I
do.
mean, in terms of the perks and all that, perks of joining the military, the United States does offer somewhat of a guide, doesn't it? Like they have all kinds of packages in place, relate like lots and lots of jobs that are offered, like federal jobs. That's the same in Canada, where they say veterans will be sort of like top of the list kind of thing. But in America, I think they do it in a bit more of a kind of wholehearted way. And there are a lot of jobs for veterans in America, but also university. They like pay for that, don't they? Which can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in the US. And then they have healthcare, and if you're wounded, you get quite a good stipend. Like I know Americans complain about it and say it's not adequate, but it is pretty it is pretty good. And there are lots of people who make that determination. They say, I want to get ahead in life, I want to go to a good university or whatever, so I'm going to join the military. And I'm pretty sure that's what JD Vance did, actually, because
You did.
he was in the Marines, wasn't he, I think. And then he went on to I can't remember where it was, Yale, I think, Yale University. So it's like in America, it's actually like it can be part of a plan to get ahead in life, part of your like plan to be really successful in life. It's like, oh, okay, I'll do this. I'll do my 4 or 5 years of the military, and then I'll get all of these advantages, and it'll make the rest of my plan will work as a consequence of that. Whereas in Canada, it's not. That isn't really the case, is it? But I mean, look at the American recruitment numbers. I mean, particularly recently, they've gone up quite a bit actually since Trump was elected, haven't they? But I mean, they're a lot better than ours are anyway.
Yeah, Freeland also says she announces plans to cap grocery profits and expand competition. I mean, that is what's lacking here in Canada as well, as we have a few large grocers that basically control the market and squeeze out all the small independents. We've seen that here in Kelowna even. The tough, it gets tougher and tougher for a smaller independent, and there's a few large grocers, and it's really tough to compete in that market. But the caps and that tend not to work. But again, I advise people to go on Chrystia Freeland's website. She's not getting a lot of press. We're probably giving her more press than anybody. If you go on her
That's why she
website,
listens.
yeah, there you go. Go on her website and read her platform. Go on Mark Carney's, read his platform. Go on Ruby Dalla. Go on, Pierre Poilievre's. Go read their platforms. They're out there. Mark Carney only has one thing on his platform, and it's climate. And you can go read that, and you're going to come to a couple of graphics, and then go way down to the bottom and click to read the full thing. And on there, it talks about him putting tariffs on steel. And so, I mean, he does agree with Trump in that there should be tariffs on steel.
Well, he had a good laugh about the idea that steel is a product that many people buy, didn't he, when he was on
Yeah,
CTV
nobody
recently?
buys steel, so why not put a like carbon tax on it?
Yeah. But you're forgetting the biggest thing that Freeland is going to announce. So what, like she's leaked it, not leaked. She's sent it to the press. This plan before she
What's that?
announces it today because she's in BC. But another one of the things that she mentioned was making it illegal or making shrinkflation illegal,
Yeah,
which I find that so funny. How are you
yeah,
going to do that?
yeah.
Maybe
More
she really is the
regulations.
genius that everybody says she is, if she can pull that one off.
Yeah, I mean, I know that a lot of people are saying they don't trust her because, like, she's led this government for 10 years. But at least, I mean, to me, she's listening. At least, I mean, this is what it looks like to me. She's hearing the voices of Canadians as opposed to just continuing to push the same mandate, which is what I hear from Mark Carney, is the same stuff, just rewrapped.
Yeah, I mean, if to make it a sports analogy, I would say the reason that she's doing that is because she is like several goals down and she's
Hmm.
running out of time. So she has to attack. She has no other option. If she's actually serious about wanting to try and win this, she's got to attack. Whereas Carney is playing defense because he's so far ahead. That's why he's not really doing anything. He's not really saying anything except for doing interviews with the BBC and stuff like that. He's like playing it cool and he's keeping it like he's being very, very safe and defensive. Whereas Freeland, because if the polls
Yeah.
suggest that she's basically lost it already,
Throw
she's got
some
to
Hail
go all in,
Marys.
hasn't she?
Throw some Hail Marys for sure.
Absolutely. Like
Um,
making shrinkflation illegal, the ultimate Hail Mary.
talking about the carbon tax. There's in there you said Trudeau's absurd greenhouse gas emission targets likely impossible to achieve, and this is from a column from Laurie Goldstein saying that it would take an absurd amount of nuclear reactors to kind of fulfill the energy that they're looking for, right? They need 16 nuclear power plants in less than 25 years. And we know that it takes a long time to build nuclear power plants, 134 hydro dams. How long did it take to do Site C? A long time, right?
Yeah, God knows. I mean, I didn't actually, when I put this in five things, I didn't want to highlight this guy's column. It's just I wanted to highlight this study from the Fraser Institute, but the only person on social media that
Mm-hmm.
had referenced it was this chap. So I wanted to embed something of social media, so I ended up doing it. So I mean, you don't necessarily have to waste your time with the column there because he's a rather tendentious chap anyway, so you might not learn very much. But what is interesting is the study itself, which found it's not only that it takes a very long time to build all these things and that you have to do a lot of them, like 134 hydropower stations. I mean, I don't think there's even the potential, never mind the concrete, to do that. I don't think there's actually the hydro potential to make that many. Surely not. But anyway, 575 wind projects. And what I find interesting about that is that that would require 1 million hectares of land. I mean, that's a lot of land. And if you think about how difficult it is in Canada to get permission to build anywhere, because there's always somebody complains, there's always some like jurisdiction that's going to try and prevent you from doing it. That just makes it seem just so unlikely, really, doesn't it? And then it's funny you mentioned nuclear power stations because that seems to me the most plausible. 16 nuclear power projects and in total 15,000 hectares of land, or roughly that much anyway. I mean, that's doable, isn't it? That's plausible, I would say. The rest of them don't really seem plausible to me. Like the amount of land that it required and the amount of projects that you would have to get built. I think this is why a lot of people look at nuclear power as the only real option to go green.
Now we just got accused of being a liberal platform. You can't win, right? So one day you're a right-wing conservative, next day you're a liberal platform. We try to speak with, we try to speak down the middle. So we definitely are reacting to what's being put out there.
Just try to be honest, really. A very old-fashioned attribute. I know I don't think people are used to honesty,
Yeah,
but
that's
we're
the thing.
trying.
So we're trying, yeah. But that's the thing, right? So like people, maybe people, it wouldn't be good to just live in an echo chamber, and just explore some of these things. And then let's talk about Ruby Dalla. She's projecting herself as the winner, and by a long shot too. Look at that. There's confidence for you. She's the
What is
real
this based on?
outsider. What's that?
Oh, it's a Twitter poll. I was just looking at the source. It says it was a Twitter poll.
I know I looked at that too. I was going to mention that for sure. But there you go. Now there's confidence. She's probably, because a lot of those polls out there we've compared, there's like the Ecos and Main Street. They're completely different. And right now, a lot of the polls are showing the Liberals leading, and a lot of people are confused with that. But a lot of these polls definitely are trying to, well, I guess, leading polls. I guess, and Ruby's, I would say, might be a leading poll because if you look at the betting markets, uh, Ruby doesn't have that much of a lead. But there's been talk I've heard that there's a lot of people that are going to vote for Ruby. So I don't know. That vote's coming up right
Surely
away.
everybody that's joined the Liberals just to for a laugh kind of thing, just to vote in this because it was so easy to do. I
Yeah.
would imagine that a large chunk of them are going to vote for her because she's been selected as the comedy candidate, hasn't she?
She has definitely, and she's definitely good for the memes. We were going to use one of her memes, but we've used so many of her memes. She had another meme out there with Carney and Trudeau. I think it was what was it, in the Mini Me? Was it a James Bond movie with the Mini Me or something like that?
Oh, Mini Me is Austin Powers, which is
Austin
the
Powers, that's what it was.
Mike Myers ripoff, or comic take at least on Bond. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So that's what she had up there today. We didn't use it today. We thought this was close enough to a meme, but Ruby's
Yeah.
confident.
Look at Mark Carney's sad little face. I mean, that's meme quality, isn't it?
Yeah, and then she doesn't even put Karina Gold on the map here or on her thing, so doesn't think that she has Bayless on there, Freeland. We have a clip to
Bad
play
news
for
for
you.
Karina.
We have a clip to play for you, in also in response to this, people accusing us of selling. I don't think we have the ability anyway to selling Canada out to the United States. I don't know that we had any signing authority, but here's a clip from Pierre Poilievre on Flag Day.
Hi, everyone. With the threat of tariffs and other insults, Canadians are uniting like never before around our pride and love in our great country. And what better way to do it than raising the flag? This Saturday is, in fact, Flag Day. So I'm encouraging everyone, regardless of your political allegiance, to go out, get yourself a flag, big or small. Put it on a flagpole in front of your home or through your window or in any other way that you can show our colors. We're very proud of this country. We'll never be the 51st state. We will always be a strong, self-reliant, sovereign country. So let's show that message by raising the flag.
True North, strong and free. So I'm waiting for the comments now to say that we're a conservative platform. um, and at least Pierre got the background right. No Swiss Alps in the background, so he understood where he was raising that flag.
Yeah, it's quite a good background actually, isn't it? I'm guessing that was when he was up in Iqaluit.
And he's wearing the right jacket, a true northerner. I've lived in northern Canada in many spots, High Level Alberta, Fort Vermilion, Alberta, Grand Prairie, Thompson, Manitoba, and I've toured Fort St. John for a bit of time. So I understand the Great White North. I think all Canadians should live in the Great White North for a little while to really understand what Canada is all about. But I know a lot of people just want to live in Toronto or Vancouver or Calgary or something like that, and they don't want to have to pay any dues. But if I was the head of the immigration policy in Canada, I'd say you got to do 5 years in the north before you can move into one of the major centers, and that would actually get more people in the north and understanding what Canada is really all about.
Yeah, and you would get to see some very interesting flora and fauna, wouldn't you? Might see a polar bear or something.
And there you go. There's a fellow Foreman Thompsonite there on the on there commenting. Thompson, Manitoba. I worked in a mine site, remote mine site there, just south of Thompson in Waboden, a small nickel mine there that was later sold to the Chinese, matter of factly. So the Chinese are buying up almost everything in Canada as well. So again, if you want to show your patriotism and your allegiance to the flag, go out and buy a flag. I know that during COVID, the trucker rally, a lot of the people shrieking right now are saying, we're denouncing the flag and say that it was the property of the truckers and that nobody wanted a flag because it showed that you were part of the trucker movement. And it's just like, and I had an argument with one of our reporters here and say the flag doesn't belong to anybody. The flag belongs to everybody.
Yeah, I think in Canada in general, there's a lot of pride in the flag, and it's pretty neutral. It's not. That kind of thing, that attempt to associate the flag with like bad people or whatever, trying to associate it with like nasty nationalists and so on. That has occurred in my land of birth in England, specifically the English flag. The white background with the red cross. That is looked upon in England as like by certain people anyway, as like a very dubious emblem, and it's something that you shouldn't really wave around because it's associated with people like Tommy Robinson, I guess. Like it isn't really. I don't even think Tommy Robinson
No.
does wave that. I think he has a British flag mo most of the time. But they've kind of tried to associate it with such things, with the far right or whatever. And I'm just telling you from experience, that is a horrible place to be in, where like your own nation's flag can't be flown
Well,
because certain people look upon it as like a negative somehow. But I
and
think Canada's not there, or not even close to that. So that's one
well,
good thing.
we didn't get much help from Justin Trudeau early on in his leadership there too, when he said that Canada has no real identity and is a post-nationalist state. So that didn't help people, and we have seen a drop in um, people's affiliation with Canada. And even right now, that this leadership thing is frustrating a lot of people, and we're seeing the youth. There is a poll out there that's showing the youth uh, not really affiliating themselves with Canada. They just want a better tomorrow. So it really behooves the leaders, the political leaders in Canada, to listen to our youth and say, like, we need to do better. And right now, we need to recall Parliament and elect a leader and do better for Canadians and put Canada first, because that hasn't been happening. We definitely don't have a government right now that puts Canada first.
Yeah, well, the world is moving in that direction, I would say. And the Americans aren't the only ones. I mean, it is happening all over the place, isn't it? This trend towards a kind of soft nationalism or something like that, or economic nationalism. So yeah, it really does seem to be the direction we're heading in. Whereas Trudeau was elected at a time, 2015, when internationalism was still
Globalism
like
was a
in
big deal,
vogue,
yeah.
wasn't it?
Globalism,
Yeah, it was like
globalism
the
was
Barack
taking
Obama
off.
presidency, and yeah.
Yeah. It should be, like I think COVID kind of ended globalism in a lot of respects as well. So,
Yeah, and the economic difficulties that have followed
yeah,
on from it, I would say. But
yeah.
also China, like the emergence of China, when it was allowed into the World Trade Organization 25 years ago, many people forecast that that was going to lead to eventually that was going to sort of poison the international system and it wasn't going to work anymore because obviously, as we've said many times, as everybody knows, the Chinese don't play by the rules. They don't, there are certain rules involved in international trade, and the Chinese don't play by them, never have, manipulate their own currency and dump products in countries to try and take over markets and things like that. Like they behave pretty, pretty much China first is how they behave. So that and other things, and obviously the war in Ukraine as well. Like the Russians, or Vladimir Putin at least, absolutely despises internationalism and the kind of what he calls the unipolar system of America being in charge of things. Um, hence the BRICS and all that in opposition to the American run system. So I just think all these things are kind of converging together, aren't they? And it just seems like the whole idea of internationalism, it already seems like it's history. It already seems like it's over.
Well, I don't, it really, I mean, to a lot of people, it was said that, like that this government has offered up Canadians as a sacrifice to the climate globalism, and like depressed our natural resources and our natural wealth as below our feet. Unlike Norway, that has used their natural wealth and built a sovereign wealth fund to the tune of 360,000 plus per person in Norway. And then, like in Canada right now, we're standing at the edge of an economic cliff because of the suppression of our natural wealth.
Well, the Norwegians were in a good spot during the Ukraine invasion because that's when there was an energy crisis in Europe and elsewhere that followed on from that. And the Norwegians were they were ready, just like the Qataris and some other Middle Eastern countries. They were ready to increase production and make absolute scads of money. So, I mean, it just gets better and better for the Norwegians, really. But I did read that Equinor, that's their state oil company, that they're starting to move away from quite a lot of green projects because they see them as not very profitable, and they're gonna double down on fossil fuels. Those naughty, naughty Norwegians. So I guess the likes of Mark Carney will be very disappointed in that.
Norway has one of the higher standards of living. They have like 100% EV adoption. Yet again, it's a really good example for Canada to look at. They have taken their wealth that's beneath their feet and benefited from that for their citizens. Canada could take a lot of lessons from there, but we offered up our country and our nation to this globalist agenda that is still being played out, that the Americans aren't doing now, the Chinese aren't doing, Russians surely aren't doing, and for what? Look at where we are.
Every single country that matters in terms of the CO2 emissions, the problem of CO2 emissions and attempts to keep global warming down, every single country that could possibly have an effect is basically operating in their own interests. They're not internationalists in that regard. The US, China, India, they're the big boys.
Now, China has said,
Canada's not even a little boy. Canada's like a crumb on the floor. You would have to get a magnifying glass out to even find it.
China has said that they will not do anything that hinders the growth of their people.
Of course not.
In regards to the
that's
carbon.
Their whole, yeah, or indeed in regards to anything. Their whole purpose, the whole purpose of the Chinese Communist Party is to benefit the Chinese nation. It's a very nationalistic ideology. Probably the biggest nationalists on earth, I would say, the Chinese. Of the big countries anyway. And then India is also very nationalist, increasingly under Modi. And the Indians, just like the Chinese, will not be told what to do about building up their energy supply. They just won't listen because they don't care what any other country has to say. They operate in their own interests. Like most countries have throughout most of history. They're not going to be told by Canada or America or the EU to not build a coal power station. If they can do that and alleviate poverty in part of India, they're going to do that, And that's obviously the same in China. It's only really at this point a handful of countries that are bothering to handicap themselves when it comes to CO2 emissions, when it comes to industry and energy basically, and it's mostly countries that don't really count, like small countries in Europe and obviously Canada. They don't really count when it comes to CO2 emissions. They can't turn the tide by themselves. So it's a very peculiar situation, that one. I never fail to be amazed by that.
Moving on to markets, gold over that $2,900 mark. We've been talking about gold. You can see that chart starting to look really impressive there. There's a lot of people out there now saying that gold is going to challenge 3,000. Markets love to challenge round numbers, and $3,000 would be, it's at an all-time high in there, and it's going to look to challenge that number in Canadian dollars. Quite a bit higher for sure. I think 4,100 here. I'll just get a quick look here in Canadian dollars right now. 41.58 in Canadian dollars. That's quite a difference, right? From $3,000 to 2,900 American, or 4,158 Canadian dollars. So again, our exchange rate not so great. Bitcoin continues to kind of bounce in that range there. There's so much turmoil going on in the world. The markets really aren't getting, the love they were getting just recently. They're all kind of looking for a direction because, these tariffs are going to hurt the market too. People don't understand that. Is the markets definitely are, they don't like uncertainty either. And right now the uncertainty is what are these tariffs going to do? Because these tariffs are not only going to hurt Canada, they're going to hurt the United States. They're going to hurt all countries. So this is a lot of uncertainty. So for a guy that loves the market so much, like Donald Trump, I don't know if he understands what he's actually doing, and maybe he's got some grand master plan, but it's surely not looking good for the world in general, right, with what's going on. Maybe he needs a Beatles song, why don't we all just try to get along?
All we need is love. That
All
could
we need is
also
love.
be
Maybe somebody should try singing that to him.
But I do think, like my earlier rant, I do sort of think that he's very interested in William McKinley, who was the president, 120 years ago or something like that, during that era where they had tariffs on everything in America and exploited the British Empire, which didn't have tariffs. I really think that he's bought into that. Either he's done his own reading and just discovered that and likes the idea of it, or somebody's in his ear telling him that that's actually like plausible. Because he keeps talking about William McKinley, and he renamed that Mount McKinley, didn't he? Denali. He
Yeah.
renamed it Mount McKinley. I think people are maybe underplaying the kind of romantic aspect, if you want to call it that, with Trump, and that maybe he really does actually idolize McKinley, and he thinks that the tariffs can work. And when some like egghead comes up and says, "There's no way this is going to work," Don, like this is not how international trade works. It does. This is not going to benefit the United States. Then he just says, "Shut up. I don't need an expert here." And he sort of sticks to his guns. And I feel like maybe that's what's happening. That he actually he just kind of has a feeling.
There's a question in here that says, why is nobody talking about the 20% carbon tax hike that's coming in April? I believe that carbon tax thing is the hike is not going to happen. I think no matter, because on March 9th, it seems like even Carney says the carbon tax is done. So Trudeau's not going to be there. So it's either going to be Carney, Ruby Dalla, according to her, or Chrystia Freeland, or the other two. And I haven't heard anybody saying that the carbon tax thing is going to survive. That consumer carbon tax is on Carney's platform. It's gone. And Chrystia Freeland seems to have changed her mind on everything that she ran on in the past, 10 years, as she's changed her mind on. So can't believe that she would stick to the carbon tax. And
It is an interesting question, though, because it's like it's built into the legislation, isn't it? That it's
Yeah.
supposed to just automatically increase. And that happens on April Fool's Day, hilariously and
Yeah.
appropriately. But the election isn't probably going to happen till early May or something like that. So I wonder if it will just kind of by default just like click in and just actually. I mean, that would be pretty.
Well,
That would be pretty awkward.
I think they'd have to put Parliament. It will actually, like that's a good point, because it will actually happen. They'd have to put Parliament back into session to make a change, right? And the Liberals have said they're not going to do it because unless everybody agrees to not vote them out or vote of no confidence, which is ludicrous in itself, right? And yeah,
also the opposition parties have said they're going to get rid of the Liberals at the first opportunity. So in that situation, they wouldn't have the opportunity to put like an amendment down to change the carbon tax or something like that. Yeah. So I guess maybe it will actually go into effect as like the final vomit hurled from the carbon tax at the Canadian people.
It is kind of like, like a Monty Python skit lots of times too, because like you say, the carbon tax hike is on April Fool's Day. And, like it seems like we've offered up the Canadian population for, for the globalist agenda. And, like that nobody else seems to want to follow other than, a few small nations, like you say. And Canada, which is one of the richest resource nations in the world, that is now in this horrible place because of those policies over the past 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder why they chose April Fools, but there are sometimes these things just happen sometimes, and it just blows my mind. But maybe they just don't have a kind of PR person around to just come and say like, oh yeah, maybe April 2nd, like just to be safe. It's almost like they don't have somebody to say that kind of thing, so they just go ahead blindly and do these things that the Conservatives have made a lot of they've made a lot of hay, haven't they, from that, and they've had a good laugh about that being on April Fool's. So it was like a gift to their opponents in a way.
I think some people just have comedy because I think the Iraqi War, the first acronym that they had there was Operation Iraqi Liberation, which is oil, right?
Iraqi freedom. That was it.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it didn't work out for them. Then here you go. Here's the stock chart of Canada. This is what the stock chart of Canada looks like. And we can see that the Canadian dollar now below the 70-cent mark. And you had that big spike down when those tariffs were put on, and then they were relieved, and you had that little bounce there. So interesting to see what happens as we move along here. Like a lot of people seeing weakness in the Canadian dollar, especially if these tariffs go on, because I mean, it could really hurt our economy with what's going on. Here you go. In our AI segment, ex-Google employee steals AI secrets for China. No surprise there, right? Leon Ding, a former Google AI engineer, could spend the rest of his life behind bars after being indicted on 14 federal charges, including economic espionage and trade secrets theft. Yeah, he stole proprietary information from Google's AI supercomputer to aid Chinese companies and the Chinese government. So I mean, that's another thing that Sam Altman has just recently accused DeepSeek of basically using their model to kind of like get a head start for DeepSeek, which is that Chinese AI model that has shocked the world with, they're saying it's only like $5 million to do it, and fewer people and the speed. And he said, well, Altman is saying, well, because they cheated. So.
Well, they've got a very long track record of doing this. The Chinese Communist Party, they it's fun. It's part of their business plan pretty much, and they've done it so many times. They sometimes send people from China to the US. Like sometimes they're there for many, many years before they come back with any goods or get caught. But the other thing that they do is, although I don't know if they still use LinkedIn, but they famously or infamously used to sort of peruse LinkedIn, didn't they, and try and like tap people up who were high up in companies and like sort of work with them over time, and then eventually like bribe them to get military secrets and or whatever technological secrets. I mean, I'm sure the Americans do this kind of thing as well, but I mean, the Chinese tend to get caught a lot more often if that is the case.
And they have interfered in our election cycles, and a lot of that still won't be discussed. But just recently, Chrystia Freeland's campaign was targeted. Odd that her campaign was targeted. But
yeah, and not our friend Mark Carney's campaign, but I don't know, maybe she just had maybe she had a weak system or something.
Yeah, we don't know. And then there's another one, and it's probably not much we're talking about, that ChatGPT is now replacing video editors. There's a lot going on. There is that AI summit. You can take that off there. That AI summit is now happening right now in Paris. And like I said, there's a really good, some speeches there to listen to what's going on, because AI is could be, and I believe so, it could be an age of abundance for everybody. We just got to get through some bumpy times, right? Buckle up, it's bumpy for sure.
Yeah, just like other economic and societal revolutions that we've experienced, like the Industrial Revolution, like that was. I mean, the difference, I suppose, is that was over a period of decades. It was a little bit slower than what we seem to be going through now. But I mean, we have, as a species, anyway, we've done this kind of thing before, so there's no reason to suspect we can't do it again.
The hope is that, like, there's a silver lining in everything, and even all the really terrible stuff that happened through COVID, we did get some silver linings in there too, being that, like a lot of stuff can be done online, like renewing your insurance. Like before they made you go to the insurance office. I know that's a small thing, but like, now you can just do it over the phone. Like, why couldn't you do it before? And the same thing right now, it makes all these people that have suppressed our natural wealth all of a sudden reconsider the pipelines and the natural wealth that's beneath our feet and access to other markets. Again, Canada sits as one of the richest resource nations in the world, and we are, again, this carbon tax, energy is an essential for human beings, for an existence, and we were taxing it like it was a luxury.
Yeah, but also just everything, including luxuries as well. Like, but also the future. The future kind of depends on energy, and I think that link, because of AI, I think even a lot of people who aren't really that interested in AI, they're now very, very well aware that it's extremely energy intensive. It requires a huge amount of energy, and as do electric cars. Like, and this whole like crisis of trying to electrify the grid and get more power stations or more sources of power online as fast as possible. I think because of that, that's put energy back on the menu a bit, hasn't it? And also what the Russians did, you were saying COVID had that silver lining. In a way, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, if it could be said to have a silver lining of any kind, it would have to be that it really focused the mind of a lot of people who'd become very complacent about energy, like the Europeans, for example, who'd quite gullibly suspected that they would always get access to Russian gas, and that it didn't really didn't really have any other plans in place. So it's kind of emphasized those two things, technology and the technological advances and the war in Ukraine. To really emphasize the importance of energy, and also just how intimately linked the green agenda and like the sort of fight against climate change or whatever you want to call it, how intimately that is linked with energy and how important it is to have energy, and that it can't all realistically come from solar panels and things like that. It is going to have to come from nuclear power or something else.
And then the other one is right now Justin Trudeau is in Paris as well, and he wasn't just in Poland too, and he's there now promoting nuclear energy. And they didn't do much about nuclear energy for the 10 years here, and then they're basically promoting hydrogen. It seems like they're promoting energy sources that have not, like than the ones that we can deliver right now. Hydrogen is a long ways off for being economically viable, and they're promoting it like, oh, we'll sell you hydrogen in the future. Now he's talking about promoting nuclear energy, which takes there's that plant being built in England right now. How long is that plant being built?
Oh God, very, very long time. It takes a long, long time.
Long time to put these plants. But I don't know why he always seems to be talking about the future. It seems like he's delaying access to it's just another excuse not to allow us to utilize, the oil and gas and LNG and all those other energies that we already have right there, beneath our feet, ready to go to market.
Well, that's certainly possible. I mean, if you're the leader of Canada and some of your like proper good friends, very, very good chums, come to see you and beg for your natural resources, and you don't want to give it to them for your own domestic reasons, like the promises on climate change and so on, how do you say no without upsetting your friends? And what Trudeau said is probably about the best thing that you can do. It's an extremely polite way to tell somebody to bugger off, isn't it? Just say, I'll give you this hydrogen, which is generated by wind turbines in 10 years if it works.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? Like, we've got something better for you, but not right now.
And I can't promise you that it works either. Nobody knows if it works, but if it does, then you're at top of the list, mate.
And I think that it's been shown that the hydrogen doesn't really have that bright of a future. So now he's on to the next one that takes forever to do anything with, his nuclear.
Yeah, although nuclear, at least we can say, really does work, and it really doesn't pollute the environment or the atmosphere or anything like that. I mean, it's the most reliable form of energy.
There's a ban in BC. Not allowed to. No SMRs allowed in BC.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of used to that kind of thing in BC, aren't we? Unfortunately, any of the old left kind of hippie causes from the 1960s, you almost guaranteed that BC will be on that as well, won't they? And there was a massive campaign against nuclear energy, wasn't there, many moons ago?
Yeah.
Campaign for nuclear disarmament and all that, and a lot of hostility towards it.
They didn't even want nuclear warships parked in the harbor in Victoria. I remember a lot of stuff on that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would say in defense of that attitude, there is a rational, I think, anyway, there is a rational reason to be suspicious of nuclear power in BC, and that would be because of the tsunamis and the earthquakes, obviously, because I mean, it's a pretty sort of geologically dodgy place, isn't it, BC? But there are parts of British Columbia where there aren't really any earthquakes, and there certainly aren't any tsunamis. But I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I know the sort of the details of the planning of nuclear power in BC, but I have read from experts that say it is possible to do it, and it would be safe in British Columbia. But
I think,
yeah, there's a political rejection of that, isn't there?
I think one thing that people have to realize is that Alberta is kind of like Alberta and Saskatchewan, kind of like our crown jewels, and they could become the Saudi Arabia of the world in as far as energy goes. Oil and gas, they have oil and gas, plentiful oil and gas. They have LNG, tons of cheap LNG. They have some of the best sunshine for solar farms. It's windy as all get out in both those provinces. Saskatchewan is loaded with uranium. So I mean, those two provinces have so much opportunity as far as energy goes. Like, they are absolutely like energy beacons, and the world is moving towards AI, which is energy intensive. And those two provinces are definitely like some of the best. And British Columbia could be in there because you combine with British Columbia with the hydroelectric, but like the governments, it sounds like now they're going to start moving some of these projects forward because British Columbia also has lots of LNG, oil and gas and stuff like that too, right? But definitely Alberta and Saskatchewan have more, a desire to kind of like tap those resources. And Alberta, when we talk about the sovereign wealth funds like Norway has, and the United States has just enacted they want a sovereign wealth fund. Alberta's had a sovereign wealth fund in a way, the Heritage Fund that's in Alberta, and they've been utilizing that for the betterment of their people for a long time.
Yeah, I mean the other problem that BC has, if it wants to go toe to toe with the prairies, is that it doesn't really have much space, doesn't really have much land, because it's all mountainous, isn't it? It's like it's very, very difficult to find the flat land to do things in BC.
I would say to people wringing their hands right now and worrying about this Trump stuff, like recognize that put your seatbelt on. It could be bumpy for a little bit, but if we put the right people in power, like I think Daniel Smith and Scott Moe definitely know how to utilize our resources for the betterment of Canadians. We definitely need to put the right people in the driver's seat, but part of that is we need to actually have Parliament recalled. That's what people should be yelling for, is recall Parliament and allowing Canadians to speak their voice. And if they elect, and give them the opportunity to elect and make sure whoever they give the keys to this time understands where they're driving the car, and that everybody in the back is a passenger and not just, like somebody that should be just sitting in the ditch while a few enjoy the fruits of Canada.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to work with, but there's also a lot of work, isn't there? So it's a big job, but unlike, again, to mention my country of birth there, unlike Britain, Canada has absolutely mountains and mountains of potential. Like it really has options and possibilities. Where in terms of like natural resources and even geographically, its location, I think, it's in a safe part of the world, relatively speaking, and the list goes on. I mean, it has a lot of advantages. Whereas Britain, I feel, and it's not just Britain; it's a lot of the countries in Europe. They look knackered. They look like they're finished. A lot of those countries in Europe. I mean, I'm thinking of like Germany, but also Britain, Italy. They look feeble, and it just like you look at their problems and you think, how do you fix those problems? I just like. It's almost impossible to come up with an answer. Whereas I feel like with Canada, it actually is possible, and that's a note of optimism. I think that Canadians should, enjoy.
We've gone on for a while here, so we're going to wrap this up. This has been a longer show, even though we had a few less things to talk about. But definitely, like I say, Canadians, like we may have to buckle up. It's a bumpy ride, but rest assured that we are a very rich, wealthy nation. We just happen to have the wrong people driving the car right now. And this is a time for you to make sure your voice is heard. And the other thing on that Bill C-18 that's going on right now, like right now we have a media that is really reliant on handouts from the federal government. And that's not a good place for media. And maybe in that respect, they're not holding power accountable like they should. So we definitely have to make sure that media is independent and free. And Facebook needs to give us back our Instagram and Facebook and allow media to speak. And that's my plug.
Yeah, and a very good plug it is too.
There you go. We do thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent.